Hello, my name's Gavin. This is Genre Books. It's June the 1st today, which means the beginning of June on the range. Some people have jumped the gun already. I can't say I blame them, but here is the official start. This is a reading event created by Michael K. Vaughan. I think this is the 4th year of its existence, and the premise and the requirement is quite simple. Read some Western literature. If you can stretch to it, read some Zane Grey and some Louis L'Amour. But just read some Western literature. Some people are reticent to start reading Westerns. I'm hopeful that this video may tempt a few people to give it a whirl. Last year I did a list of 50 Western novels available on Project Gutenberg. I didn't want to repeat the exercise this year, but I wanted to do something in a similar vein, so I've decided to concentrate on short stories. Westerns lend themselves very well to the short story format, or the short story format lends itself well to Westerns. I don't quite know which way it works, but it works. And Western pulps were some of the most popular pulps from the early part of the 20th century. In fact, the Western short story was popular before the pulps. They appeared in a number of the slick magazines and even the more established literary periodicals, some of which have made their way into this list. A Western short story anthology can be a glorious thing. So what I'm putting together today is my own pulp magazine, my own Western anthology, and I'll be providing links for all of these stories again in the description. Here is a list of 20 stories that appeared not only in the Western pulps but in the more established literary magazines, the slicks, etc. Number 1 is W.C. Tuttle and Dancing Devil Range. Tuttle wrote 30 novels, innumerable short stories. His main and most famous character was a range detective called Hashknife Hartley. Tuttle also narrated the radio series that came after these stories began to be published. Tuttle also wrote films, but it's for his Western stories and novels that he is best remembered, and Hashknife Hartley is quite a fun character. I've read a couple of these. They are slightly comedic but still retain excitement in their execution. For the second entry, we skip back a couple of decades to June 1929 and the magazine Western Story for One Jump Ahead by Ray Humphreys. Humphreys wrote a number of Western novels: Trouble at Hot Sulphur, Denver Dude, Death Hunch, and The Sequel. But here is one of his shorts. For number 3, we are staying in the 1920s and actually skipping back 3 years to 1926 and the popular magazine. The story is A Cathcart or a Riggs by Roy Norton. Some writers of Westerns are very prolific. Lots of pulp writers have to be prolific. They're not getting paid too much per word. I don't think that worried the writer at number 4 in this list. Walt Coburn, a man so synonymous with and famous for Westerns that there were 2 magazines with his name on the front cover. There was Walt Coburn Western Magazine and Walt Coburn Action Novels. But here we are looking at Paid Off from Adventure from July 1925. Coburn wrote a lot of pulp stories before moving and graduating to full-length novels. At number 5 is a story that is quite different. It's much later, March 1954 and appears in a science fiction magazine, Amazing Stories. It's The Draw by Jerome Bixby. Bixby was probably more known for his science fiction and probably more known for his writing for the screen over his writing for the page. He wrote a couple of Twilight Zone episodes. All the stories that the Twilight Zone episodes were based on, including probably one of the most famous Twilight Zone episodes, It's a Good Life. But we are being temporal flibberty-gibbets and going back 3 decades to the Blue Book from 1924 for the 6th pick here. Will S. Brindley, A Strike at Too Dry. At number 7 is the earliest entry on this list, Arthur Chapman's Rustlers Beware from Western Story magazine, December 1921. Arthur Chapman, as well as writing pulp stories, was also a staff writer for the New York Tribune. He was also a proponent of cowboy poetry, and on top of that wrote a non-fiction account of the story of Colorado. So remaining, even when he's looking at other literary forms, squarely at the Western. A charge which is fairly levelled at the Western is it is a bit of a sausage fest, but there are female Western writers, and here at number 8 is one of the earliest and well-known, Bertha Muzzy Sinclair, better known as B.M. Bower. This story is The Adam Chaser. It's from the popular magazine, September 1925. Bower is best known for her stories of the Flying U Ranch. She is also an exemplar of the bleed, the mix between Western writers and Western cinema of the 20s and the 30s. She was personal friends with both Gary Cooper and Tom Mix. One of the titans of the Western genre is Zane Grey. Please feel free to check out my continuing series, 50 Zanes of Grey, where I read at least 50 of his novels and other works. But here is a short story from McCall's in August of 1926 from Missouri. From the following year, the popular magazine, this is July 1927. The writer is Bertrand W Sinclair. The story is Out of the Blue. He was a Canadian writer, and yes, there's another Sinclair. He was married to B.M. Bower. Back to the magazine, The Blue Book, January 1925, Gunplay by Michael J. Phillips. He's probably more famous for a piece of science fiction writing in our country's service, but as you can see, lent his pen to the Western as well. Number 13 on the list, Raymond Smiley Spears. His day job was as a reporter for the New York Sun, but he did write 73 Western short stories for Adventure magazine, and this is one of those 73, Empty Bottles from July 1928. And at number 14, another one of those very prolific authors. 200 novels, 400 novelettes, and 800 short stories. H. Bedford Jones wrote across genres: fantasy, historical, western, adventure, science fiction, and for magazines like Argosy, Blue Book, Weird Tales. Here is one from the Blue Book, and January 1924, Cactus and Rattlers. Western stories weren't always historical, one which is glumming onto the very popular emerging technology of radio back in 1923, and it's another story from Adventure magazine, is Will H. Grattan's Broadcast. And at number 16, for authenticity, a man whose day job was actually as a cowboy and became a writer, Austin Hall, who wrote fantasy and science fiction, but is best known for his westerns. This is from the Popular magazine, September 1923, Where the West Begins. Edwin L. Sabin was a newspaperman, a poet. He wrote adventure books for boys and a biography of the pioneer Kit Carson. From the Blue Book, June 1924, Easy Come, Easy Go. At number 18, a very famous name in Western writing and a man whose prolific output probably puts even Walt Coburn to shame, Max Brand. This is All Story Weekly, July 1925, and his story, A Sagebrush Cinderella. A writing married couple next, Alma and Paul Ellerbe. This is from Adventure magazine, again, July 1928, and is called Especially Dance Hall Women. Of the two, Alma Elby, originally Alma Estabrook, was the more prolific of the writers and successful in a number of different publications and some fairly prestigious ones: Lippincott's, Harper's, Smith's, Collier's, Century, Metropolitan, Red Book and Ainsley's. And rounding off the list, number 20, The Riddle of the Rangeland, Forbes, Parkhill, back to the Blue Book, back to the 1920s, February 1924. Over a 30-year writing career, he wrote westerns, he wrote for Weird Tales, he wrote for Collier's and some of the other slicks. Sometimes he wrote under the odd pseudonym Otto Vlotto. There we have 20 Western short stories. All free, all linked below. Download to your Kindle, your Kobo, read it on screen, print it out and bind it in leather, but maybe just give it a whirl. If you're already reading westerns, there just might be a name on that list that you're not familiar with, so you can give that one a try. Until next time, bye.